Good morning, everyone. I'm Councilman Robert Stokes, Chairman of Education, Workforce, and Youth Committee. Also joining us today is President of the City Council, President Mosby. Members of this committee, Councilman Torrance from the 7th District, Councilwoman Porter from the 10th District, Vice President Sharon Middleton from the 6th District. I'd like to, Councilman Cohen from the 1st District. Also, I'd like to recognize Sophia G. from the Mayor's Office and Teresa Cummins from the Mayor's Office. Also, Tiffany Macklin from the President's Office. Marguerite Kern, who is the chair of this committee. Before we start, I would just like to read the resolution and have the President, who's the sponsor of both of these bills, have some opening remarks. And there will be 2 hearings today. This is Council Bill 23-074R for the purpose informational hearing middle school sports program. For the purpose of inviting representatives from the Baltimore City school system and other relevant stakeholders to discuss the availability, accessibility, and diversity of sports programs offered at the middle school age for youth. And I will switch this over to President Mosby for open remarks, who is the sponsor of both of these bills.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we're going to do parity 175. No, okay, we're doing 174 and 175. Okay. Well, first and foremost, thank you to Baltimore City Public Schools for coming out. You know, obviously, when we talk about providing opportunities, holistic opportunities for our young folks, extracurricular opportunities are really important, specifically for Baltimore City Public School students. You know, a lot of times their only outlets to having access to extracurricular sports is through their school setting. So really excited that Baltimore City Public Schools, under the leadership of CEO, has been listening to the council and taking a really strong approach this year of at least itemizing out money for middle school sports. So this council is really excited about that. I think that kind of really flows into the parity issue. Many of our young women in the city of Baltimore, our young girls, don't get access to organized sports until high school, which ultimately puts them at a competitive disadvantage to neighboring counties for them to compete at the high school, JV, or even varsity level. So that is kind of the nexus of why we're here today, to talk about middle school sports, not just specific to young women, but also specific to young men, and then flow into the parity discussion around opportunities and access from from an equity of sports for our young women. So with that, Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the law department I'm going to go over agency reports. The law department has favorable comments.
No comments, thank you.
So Mr. John Davis. Mr. John Davis, the chief of Baltimore City Schools, will be doing a presentation. Before we start, Chief, can you introduce the rest of your co-workers?
I'm happy to. I'll start with our executive director of the Whole Child Office, and that's Sonia Goodwin. To the far right is Melissa Broom. She's our director of policy and legislative affairs. And then from our athletics team, the director of athletics is Tiffany Bird, and our coordinator of athletics, who's done the yeoman's work in middle school, is Tanisha Montgomery.
Thank you. Chief Davis, you know how long your presentation will be?
I'm going to try to be quick. I don't think it will be more than 10 minutes.
Okay.
I think that should be enough time.
Okay, you can proceed. And
I do want to start off by thanking the chair, the council president, and all of the council members here today for giving us the opportunity to talk about middle school sports. I have to be honest with you, even though I started 31 years ago, I don't really know the last time there was organized middle school sports. I started at West Baltimore Middle School and there were 1,500 kids there. And we had little smatterings of this and that. And so the idea that we are bringing this back, it's been a journey to get here. I also want to thank Under Armour because they provided a landscape analysis in 2021 that kind of gave us a little bit of a ramp onto this. We have a pilot that we'll talk about last year, and then we are putting more money that that Council President Mosby talked about in our budget moving forward. So we've been on a journey, and I want to thank folks for giving us the opportunity to talk about it today. And again, this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the initial work, our expansions, and then really what students can expect. From there, we'll take questions. So last year, right, we really piloted the sports clinics and culminating activities in a number of different sports, right? Schools were able to have these sports just on their school level, and we made sure at the end of the year there was a culminating activity. Again, we also had clinics that were more of an introduction so that students could learn about tennis or if they had not played organized baseball, softball, soccer, or volleyball, right? This was our first foray after a number of years without as much middle school sports. And like I said, we had culminating activities that resulted in about 1,500 students participating from 30 different schools. Our expansion, right? Our expansion next year will really be a combination, and I will talk about this, around district-operated sports, and then we will put out a request for proposal, or actually we are putting out a request for proposal so that we have partners that can also build in additional sports that will begin in the school year. And this is, again, around middle school, around 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I just want to double down to some of the opening remarks. This is about making sure we've got a pipeline to getting into high school, right? If you go into the 9th grade and you have not played specific sports, you are obviously at a disadvantage. So the idea of giving our young people the opportunity to compete, which is really what we want to begin doing, not just having a culminating activity, but being able to compete throughout the year in specific sports is what we're all about. If we get detailed about this, you see these two lists here, right? We are going to have district-coordinated sports in the sports on the left-hand side, and we will work with partners and a vendor that will help us organize this on the right-hand side. We're also working to coordinate this. One of the obstacles always in this type of space is transportation, and so we're making sure that we don't overlap with respect to our district-coordinated sports and our vendor-coordinated sports. You'll probably hear me say this at the end, but I want to be super clear to anyone that's watching and to the council, right? This is going to be a journey, right? If it's decades where we didn't have organized middle school sports and we have a lot of K-8 schools, it's going to take a minute to get to the point where we have different opportunities that are really as robust as we want. We're excited to start this year, but at the same time, this is going to be a journey for the next few years. Yeah, let's keep going. So the student experience, right? We will have city school-sponsored interscholastics through school-based teams. We will also have vendor-sponsored teams in the list that you saw on the previous slide, right? And to be quite honest, right, if a school cannot field a team, then students will be allowed to be free agents onto other teams because one way or another, if someone has interest, we want to make sure we provide it. We will continue with some clinics because we found those to be successful this year, so we don't necessarily want to stop that. But the student experience will be a combination of sports that the team coordinates and we have competitions, and then some that our partners will do as well under one collective unit. our role, right? We will end up implementing the 7 sports we talked about, and we will have an RFP process. We are targeting the winter 2024, right, to start our vendor-led sports. Our procurement process, with all due respect, just takes a minute, and we want to make sure we do this right so we can get the right capacity on board to coordinate all of these sports. So that's why we've got winter 2024 to start with the vendor-led sports. In the end, right, we've got about 80 schools that have middle grades. A lot of them are K-8, some of them are standalone middles, but we will end up dividing the 80 schools into cohorts across the city so that they can begin to compete with schools in their, I think it's mostly geographical area. And, you know, again, part of this coordination that I talked about that will be a journey is the idea that each school will have an activity advisor to coordinate these types of things. And then each school will also designate a coach, of course, that we have to ramp up and make sure they understand. When we initially talked with principals about this, right, they're excited about it, but they're also a little bit nervous because they never had to do this before. Council President Mosby, you brought that to my attention as well in one of our conversations, and that is something that we're going to have to continue to lead with. Principals have a lot on their plates, so making sure we can work with an activity advisor for the coordination of this, but also making sure that the principal is well informed to make this a robust offering across their school, and making this a foundational part of our school is super important. And frankly, that's a lot of our role. I feel like it's a lot of my role as the chief of schools. I know the athletic team takes that as well, but so do my principal supervisors, right? They know that this has to be infused in what they talk about. We talk about extracurricular activities, we talk about sports, but all of it goes into a school culture, and on the middle school end, it's so very important. Again, that is the basis of what we are going to do in this upcoming year, so we welcome questions. I am super excited to talk about this. I know the team has been working hard in the last couple of years to get to this point. I just also want to be clear what I said about 5 minutes ago. This is going to be a journey. When there weren't sports before, it's going to take a minute for this to ramp up to the point that it is as robust as the vision that we all have for our young people. And getting principals on board to make sure they understand the coordination level, making sure that we train them and get them to that point is going to be a big deal. We're going to start down this path this year. We started to some point last year, but it is going to be competitive sports this year, and we're going to knock this out. So with that, happy to take questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Before we start, we're actually going to do 2 questions per committee, or those persons are here. And if there's any personal stuff that has to do with school sports, this is not the hearing for this. That can be a side conversation. And we're going to stay with the questions. I don't want to hear a story. I want you to ask the questions that we're here for, and we'll move on to that. And before we start, turn it over to President Mosby. I know, sorry. I wanted to ask a question. Have you partnered or talked with the Rec and Parks also, because they also have their infrastructure already there, and maybe that could be a partnership you can do in terms of school sports too?
I know we have, and I think for some of these level of details, I'm going to ask on Director Byrd or Coordinator Montgomery to give a few more details, but I know we have spoken to them because we want to make sure they understand what we're doing and can support and be partners in the work.
Yes, that's correct. We have had a conversation with Mr. Quentin Matthews, but we consider it to be ongoing. We also know that they have a new hire in Mr. David Johnson, so we actually have a meeting scheduled to speak to him this afternoon. I think he said he's been on board roughly 30 days, so yes.
Okay, thank you. And I'll turn this over to the Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When do we expect coordinated sports to begin?
I mean, it's going to start in the fall. What are the sports in the fall from the ones we listed?
Cross country and flag football, and our competitions actually start that first week in October.
Has the students and the school body been made aware of this offering?
Yes, we've had different presentations to them so that they know that these offerings are there.
To the parents and to the students?
I think that we have communicated broadly, right, that we are doing middle school sports. I don't know if we want to talk more about the communication effort.
Yeah, so we have been working closely with the principals and ILEDs, and we've already actually published the information to the schools and to the principals and have begun signups at the school level. So the school has indicated and has begun to indicate their interest and participation. Our next plan of action is once school begins, because there will be a number of, documents and information that we'll need to gather in terms of students and rosters. So that first week to 2 weeks of schools, that's when the information will be provided to the parents and the students to be able to gauge interest, have signups, provide information, and really let them know and introduce what the sports are so that they can begin to sign up so that we can develop our rosters and see how many student athletes that we will need to accommodate.
Yes, the concern I have, and we've kind of talked about this, is ensuring that we just don't rely on the principals. I mean, obviously, we could easily send out, mail to the children and their parents to let them know that this is coming up, kind of like what we do in high school sports. I know many of the young folks in middle school do not understand or know that this is a possibility for this particular year. And how October at this point to me seems really aggressive. If we're going to kick it off in fall, we should probably try to have that level of communication, to expect that the principals in setting up their schools and all that they have to do is going to make this a priority. I just get concerned that that's not going to be the case. So I'm concerned of just, the level of information that the young folks and their parents have at this point to know that this opportunity is available for them.
Yes, and thank you for that. And knowing that this is a very heavy lift for our school principals, we also work with, we instituted and started this last year and putting the information out, but we work in partnership with physical education. Once teachers return back to school that week that there's professional development, we actually will be doing presentations, having meetings, having office hours for those teachers to be able to support at the school level. So everything doesn't fall on the principals, because we definitely understand just the breadth of everything that they have to take care of. So we do have a communications plan and a plan to actually have hands-on to be able to offer that information to teachers and, particularly physical education teachers, but some of the classroom teachers who will also support, because we know they have that direct day-to-day with the students, interaction with the students. So thank you for that. So we'll definitely keep that at front of mind, but we do already have some plans in place to make sure that they have the information. And then this past year with the transition year, we worked with about 57 to 58 schools just with the end of the year and having the activities. So they kind of already know the trajectory. So we'll be working to have them in their cohorts to work together to say, hey, how can we support you, so that everyone at least has access to the information.
Thank you. Is inside of the communications plan, is the city schools phone tree, text message alert, email, is that factored into it?
We'll have to get back to you on that, because most of our things come via email, and we heavily utilize our district athletics website. So the schools know, the principals know, the parents know, they have access to that as well. But we will definitely look into the phone tree and using like the robocall systems and things like that to provide information.
Again, I just want to highlight, I think that there might be a disconnect. I think that the majority of middle school parents and the overwhelming majority do not know that this is a possibility coming up in October, right? So I guess what I'm asking the school system is, can we proactively communicate? Because I'm not sure, will physicals be required similar to high school?
Yes, so they are, as a part of our plan and putting together the requirements, there is a medical clearance and sign off that the parents will have to do, and as a part of one of the asks with the well-child visits and things of that nature. So there are some requirements, and that's something that we challenge with and we're working through as a team to be able to say, okay, how can we support? We are working with a number of our medical partners because we know that this is going to be, as soon as we come out and as soon as school comes back and they start to learn that, hey, this is an opportunity to be able to provide additional opportunities for sports physicals. But yes, we will definitely take note of that is a concern, so making sure we ramp up that support with that.
Will the system on record for clearance be Dragonfly?
In terms of submitting documentation?
Yeah.
No, they'll actually submit them to the school, and we use the Google Forms and a secure platform for the school to actually upload and submit them to us.
Okay. I guess going back to, and I hate to continue to beat a dead horse, but when we talk about the need for the parent involvement to ensure that they, one, are signing up, two, have the appropriate physical and are appropriately cleared, all these things take time, right? And with the busy schedule that our parents have, with the start of the school year, as our young folks are being engaged in this new school environment potentially, this is kind of a lot. So for us to be proactive right now is kind of what I'm asking for. So if you guys could just take a step back and kind of look at the overall communication strategy to ensure that we're being as proactive as possible, and definitely love to hear from you on that.
Yeah, we will. I appreciate the push because what is going through my mind is the different communications that we have to put out about the beginning of the year and how this can link right in, right?
Correct.
This year, we're doing an annual student verification that is absolutely new to our community. Neighboring communities, neighboring jurisdictions, you have to enroll every single year. We've never had to do that in Baltimore City. We are changing that. And we communicated that out, and I think had 600 people in the first couple of days verify their enrollment. And my only point is we should be linking these communications up together so that they're all together for the family, and I think that push is the right one.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll wait for the next round.
Council, let me recognize Councilman Bullock, member of the committee from the 9th District, and Councilwoman Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess a continuing question along the same lines as the president, and you talk about the journey and partnerships. Has there been communication with the State Department of Education, because they have middle school advisors, specialists? We have counties that already are doing this with their middle schools, so we're not reinventing the wheel. That help and partnership with the state is important as well. Can anyone answer, has there been any communication with the State Department of Education, and they have paid specialists and advisors that help basically every county and the city if that outreach is there?
I will take note regarding MSDE. We have worked very closely to see what our local other educational agencies do. So we have a record of the counties that are offering middle school sports. We also noted in our research when we were going through our proposed plan, several of the jurisdictions don't really offer it from a district level because they have very strong recreational programs and they allow outside partners to do it. But the counties that do offer it, Montgomery, PG, Baltimore County, we are in touch with the people that lead their middle school program, but we will note to make a connection with MSDE.
Please, I think that is a very important outreach. As a past employee at one time of the State Department of Education is bringing me back to the apprenticeship, and that following that path, as we have really made grounds on that in the last 10 or more years. They have specialists that will work directly with you on this, and I think that would be a good idea to kind of touch bases.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Cohen and then Councilwoman Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the City Schools team. Shout out to Mr. Merrill, who's in the back there, who I think also contributed to this plan. I think it's great that you all are doing this. I think it's badly needed. I remember being a middle school teacher. There were no middle school sports. We started a books and basketball team at my school, and on the first day, 93 kids showed up. There is a clear desire for middle school kids to play sports, and so I'm really glad that you all are taking this step and being proactive about it. You mentioned a couple of times the vendors. I was curious who those vendors are. Have we worked with, or are we working with Volo Sports? I know that they have a kids sports league that they do where the grown-up sports subsidizes the kids sports. So just curious, one, who are the vendors, and has Volo been brought in?
I'll let the team correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I understand the RFP process is until it goes forward, we aren't really allowed to make any specific contacts with any organizations. So we have to wait until that is put forward in order to make those connections. In our planning, we are aware of certain organizations that have a footprint. They do what they do very well, but we just can't move forward until that part is complete.
I'll also say, and Tiffany or Tanisha, I might be wrong, the RFP is really the capacity we need to help us coordinate the probably different vendors, right? And so that's the initial RFP, is to help us coordinate with different partners to eventually get to all of those sports. But like Tiffany said, we can't talk too much about, specifics.
Okay. No, appreciate that, and understand the need to do it in a way that's sensitive and that doesn't skirt or trip any lines. I think kind of similar to the previous line of questioning, I think having a robust communication push now on this will be really important. What you don't want to have happen is vendors, particularly smaller community-based organizations, come back and say, nobody told us, why is this happening, and we didn't know about it. And I think that's a dynamic that sometimes plays out with us and with city schools. And so I would say, in the same way that President Mosby is, I think, making the right push around parents being informed, making sure that potential vendors, like really getting that message out that this RFP is out there. Because again, I know there will be folks who will want to step into that space, and I think the more we can enable and make this open to everybody, I think the more success it's going to have. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chief Davis, and again, the whole team. Appreciate you all doing this.
Councilwoman Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two questions related to the school year 23 sports participation data, so particularly slide 9. I wanted to just follow up on the participants and the data related to field. I believe so. Yes, ma'am. So it's related to school participation data related to field hockey. So, oh, that's the wrong one? Oh, okay, never mind. I'll hold it till
We'll
next
come
one.
to that in
Okay.
the second one.
Oh, it's the next one? Okay, perfect. I'll hold my question to the next one. Thank you.
Councilman Bullock.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and also thank you to Council President Mosby. We both have a soft spot for middle school sports. Both have middle schoolers, now a high schooler, and I think about the heavy lift it was for some of us in terms of trying to find private entities and thinking about the cost and transportation. And that's really what my question is about at this point in terms of what's being communicated to families and what the expectations are, particularly around cost. We know that some sports, track and field, some shoes, but if we're talking about baseball or tennis, there are other costs involved. So have we talked about or thought about the cost that might be incurred by parents and how that is being communicated? And then the other piece that I would want to talk about is also transportation. We know that, again, if you're talking about sports, you're talking about competition, you're talking about transportation between schools, and then thinking about possibly other jurisdictions. So I'm just curious in terms of what that's been like as you're fleshing out this program.
Well, let's start with transportation. That has been something that we are very aware of and have had a plan and been working with our Office of Transportation, working with vendors, working with community partners to see that we can lay out a plan that best services our students, our schools. So as Chief Davis talked about, our district-sponsored activities will happen during the school week. During the week, but after school, so we can leverage those transportation options there. When we provide transportation, the vendor coordinated activities will happen on the weekend, so that those transportation options and how parents and guardians are assisting with that to make sure that they're able to get to those competitions. And then we're also looking at how that impacts and how we can leverage times and pickup times and do things kind of in between seasons so that we have more transportation options available to us. But we are, again, fully aware that that is a challenge that we'll have to continue to work to overcome. But we do have a plan in place when it comes to transportation and how we've kind of geographically placed schools to be able to maximize what we do have access to.
No, thank you. That's really helpful. And then as far as cost, thinking about it from two perspectives. One, in terms of the family, but also the school itself. And I heard you before say, you don't want everything to fall on the principals, and principals have a lot to deal with, thinking about their budget. So just thinking about how much that will impact a particular school, but then also if there's any cost to parents, how we defray that cost, or what's the expectation there too?
Okay, so Ms. Byrne and I will tag team on this one. In terms of actual participation for teams, we have already budgeted, schools have budgeted and allocated the $50 per pupil to be able to support athletics. So we do have a fee structure that we work with the schools, and they are already aware of, for this particular sport, this is how much it costs, and it comes with, uniforms, transportation, officials, the coaches, stipends, and everything like that. So between ESSER dollars and COP funds, we'll be able to support and sustain that. And we do have a sustainability plan built out, not just for this year, to be able to accommodate and adhere to those costs. So uniforms, will be provided where there is a need. Some schools, because they have been participating with us or they participated last year, already have uniforms and things to be able to outfit the students for participation and to participate safely. So where there is a need, we've already accounted for that and budgeted for that to be able to fill those needs and provide uniforms. And then I'll kick it over to Ms. Byrd in terms of additional associated costs.
We're very excited, and as Chief Davis indicated, this will be the first year. I want to be clear, we've done middle school sports. Prior to this, we kind of maintained what we had. We've never taken on the full 80 schools. And so this will be the first year we'll be going into a school year with a budget specifically for middle school. So we're very excited to be able to do it, of course, with the cost already outlined. And so the goal is always to keep costs down for parents. Now, I understand there are some, things that kids like to have that some parents may support, but our goal is to do this at minimal cost to the parents. The schools have received funds, so that's the goal.
Awesome. I'll just say thank you for your answers. I'm really encouraged, by this program, but also the thought that you put into it. So again, thank you for the time.
Councilman Torrance?
Good morning, guys. I'm going to hit y'all with the hard question. First, I have a committee request for a sustainability plan that you have in terms of making sure this is viable moving forward, because I heard ESSA and the COPE dollars. As someone who had to get the athletics office out of debt when I was at city schools, I want to make sure how we can afford to do this moving forward, right? Because I'm encouraged that you have 7 staff people when there was an office. When I was there, 3. And Ms. Byrd handled for 2 people for the entire district. I want to know how can we keep the 7 moving forward and do the work that you're doing now. So I just want to have a copy of the plan. My next question is transportation. Transportation is your biggest budget cost. It is your biggest budget drain. Have we explored any conversation about having, outside of your district, buses and the specific vendors, an RFP where vendors had a lower cost for athletics? Because when I was there, I remember at one time it was $350 a bus, and for only 2 hours of service, $350 was too much. So I just want to make sure, is the district looking into having a separate fee structure for just vendors who are just doing athletics at that time and not the typical vendor that we will have doing special education, transportation, or other various transportation for field trips, because this is a different need.
Chief Davis is writing, I'm writing, all recommendations are welcome, but I think we have tried to turn over every rock as it exists for transportation, because it is the biggest hurdle. As we are implementing these sports, we've tried to be strategic and thoughtful about what we can lift, because the reality is we are all moving at the same time. We are doing this in addition to high school sports, and we're pulling on all the same resources. So yes, we have considered the vendors that we have. We've considered additional vendors. We're looking for vendors specifically related to just athletic runs who may not do school runs and have more availability and accessibility. But we also know that it's an industry that's a little bit struggling in terms of drivers. But we take those recommendations. They are noted, but we are looking and examining things that we haven't done in the past.
Yeah, I will double down on what Director Byrd said. And it's been brought up a couple of times in this discussion. Transportation is the biggest obstacle, right? Between even thinking about vans and thinking about fee structures, like you said, I think, Councilmember Torrance, we need to get back with that type of detailed answer, because I can't tell you about the fee structure. It's a really good point. But I know our transportation team probably knows that detail a little bit better than we do. But again, as Director Byrd said, it's a really good point. And it is the biggest obstacle besides just the overall organization that you mentioned. It was Director Byrd and one other person at one time. So we've been building this out for the last couple of years, and we are hopeful to go live with the middle school sports and make this something special for our 6th through 8th graders.
So here's my next question. 5th graders. The majority of our schools are actually K to 8s. 5th graders often do activities with 6th graders. How are we nurturing that conversation between our 5th and 6th graders? I firmly, and I'm going to put out there, believe our 5th graders should be able to engage. We only have 3 standalone middle schools, right? So I think as a part of that transition to middle school, and balancing that time, I think our 5th graders should be included. So have we thought about how we can actively include our 5th graders?
Well, we do, to your point, we do have just a few standalone middle schools, and our charge that we're working with, of course, is providing opportunities to as many students as we can. For our K through 5, we have been partnering with physical education to be able to offer and expose, particularly at the intramural level. And while we understand, our 5th graders do want to be involved, then that also pushes down to our 4th graders and then 3rd graders, as we have seen over these last couple of years. People have reached out like, hey, my student is in 4th grade, and they're typically playing recreation with their 5th, 6th, 7th grade peers. So we do have to make sure that we are able to have a win and stabilize the program, and then we can start to look at, further down the line, how do we infuse and get even more. But we definitely want to make sure that we are looking at our middle schools, because those are the direct pipeline to high school. And then, to your point, looking at our students that are in younger grades, like particularly that 3 to 5 band. And then we also have to look at as they start to grow in matrition, like what that looks like in terms of safety, when you may have a smaller 4th or 5th grader, and then, they're participating with 8th graders. Sometimes that can be difficult to parse out. So we just want to make sure that we're looking at all of those things and be able to participate as safely as possible. So build and then be able to expand further that way.
Thank you. And then just to prepare you for my next round, I'm going to ask you about charter school compliance with this too.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
I'm going to queue up charter school compliance, because my biggest issue is with charter autonomy, and sometimes they don't follow rules and regulations. Just being transparent.
Okay, I just wanted to know that the charter was in our count of 80, so I wasn't sure if it was their ability to participate, but it's the compliance piece. Okay, thank you.
Councilman, we waive our time to you because no other members. Oh, you have one? Okay, Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How did we come up with how do we parse out the sports from coordinated to vendor-led?
I believe the main beginning point was what we had experience with and what we knew that we could do well, right? It's just, you know, what we want to commit to, we gotta pull that off.
Kind of the strategy of, do we go after the longest pole in the tent or the low-hanging fruit? Low-hanging fruit, since we're kind of starting
Yes.
this out, it gives you ability to figure out scheduling and.
Yes.
Understood.
And the
That
one
makes
thing-
total sense.
And the one thing I would like to call out, because I know sometimes it stands out to people in the offering, is the unified offering. We're committed to making sure that we provide opportunities, because ethically and by law, we're supposed to students with disabilities. So sometimes when people will see like unified by that, we want to make sure students with disabilities are included. We do it at the high school level, and as we branch into the middle school level, we have an obligation to make sure that they have opportunities to participate on athletic teams.
Got it. As far as the programs, is this individually selected by a competitive process? Meaning, for basketball, for instance, you know, you have 100 kids at one school that want to play on the basketball team. Will there be like a tryout, and then, you know, maybe 20 kids or 15 kids are selected? Is that the way that this program will operate?
Yes, similar to the high school structure, they will have an opportunity at the school level to determine like their team requirements with the coach. It will be a tryout process for the number of spots for a team. That is correct.
Thank you. Is there a specific like timeline that's in place for the individual schools to identify the coaches, particularly for the fall sports?
Yes, that information is communicated to the schools through the intent forms that we've already sent out, and where there is an express need, we do try to make sure we can provide support, but that is correct. They will be responsible for the coach selection.
Got you. When are they responsible for identifying the coaches?
I would actually have to put up pull up the site, because all of the dates for the school year are on the site. So it'll say like session 1, your intent form is due this date. I know actually today, the intent forms are due. And then September 12th is our coaches meeting, and then their documents are due. So they will have to have identified a coach or, you know, a lead for that sport by September 12th in order for them to come to the professional development session that we have. And then their certifications and documents and things like that will be due shortly after. And all of those dates are highlighted for the entire school year.
Thank you.
Session.
Now, will the schedules be coordinated from a centralized location, or are you expecting the different quads or individual schools? How does that happen?
It's central.
Okay. Have you guys worked on the schedules yet?
Yes, actually, well, we have the dates for session 1 activities, so we have all of the dates for cross-country and all of the dates for flag football. Once we solidify those schools that will actually be participating, and then we kind of like work on the transportation piece, the official schedule of who will be competing against who and on what date for like flag football will be published. But those dates are actually already published and secured.
Understood. How do we determine what schools will be able to participate?
Thank you for that question. Right now, it is essentially open, transportation being that biggest coordination piece, because we do only have access as of right now to so many buses for our middle school athletics. So as we look geographically at those schools that say they intend to participate, if there's some schools that we can kind of double up on, so for example, if there's a school that's maybe within 4 or 5 minutes, we would be able to transport them to the venue together. We do have a general selection process, so in the event we're not able to provide the transportation and we do have to limit the number of teams, we do have selection criteria that we're working to finalize, but we're letting the schools know, hey, there may be some additional criteria that need to be met.
Got you. I definitely appreciate the level of effort that's needed to even put us to this point, and then the level of effort that will be needed for us to successfully lift it off the ground. So the question is just really around organizational structure, ensuring that kind of we have, thought through some of those things and those things in place. And it's not to go against, any effort that you guys have put in to date. The one thing that when we had our meeting, and I brought it up a couple times, and I feel really strongly about this. That's why I want to say it on the record. If we set up this amazing program and kind of take a step back and allow our principals to kind of decide, if this is important for their school, or, how they're going to get communication out, or how coaches are going to be selected, or when they're going to be selected, or, what things they'll make available to make this successful, I am extremely concerned that we will not be maximizing this opportunity for our young folks. And that is not a knock on our school administrators or our principals, but the reality is they just have so much to do and so much to focus on. And the reality is the public, the media, legislative bodies judge them not on, whether they have a quality extracurricular programs, particularly new programs like sports. It's on tests, and it's on student performance. So I just say that, we always have to be mindful of that, it's one thing for me to throw information over the wall and hey, you had the information, this person took it, this person, did not. Now, I guess this is going also maybe a little personal for me, because as a young person at Chinquapin Middle School, I always admired my friends who went to better middle schools, like Roland Park, where they always had organized sports, and we had zero organized sports. And I can remember when the organization came out with middle school lacrosse, right? And we found out that our principal was asked if he wanted to have middle school sports at Chinquapin, and he told them no. And he said that, I don't think that you guys are prepared or ready, and I don't feel comfortable of sending you across the city or doing this because whatever issues we were having at the time at Chinquapin. And I thought at that time, being a young activist and student government association president of my middle school, I thought it was completely unfair. So I'll say that to say, just as one small anecdotal example, that again, you guys have put in a lot of work. But if we think that we can just put this car in front of schools and it's going to take off and relying on our principals, I'm just concerned because they have so much other things to do and so many other focuses. So I'll just ask that, when we're constantly talking about is communicating to the parents, communicating to the students, ensuring that we have the certain level of cross balance and check back with Central and our principals to ensure that they're doing what they have to do to give all our young folks the opportunity.
Yes, Council President, what I know is as someone who works with principals, right, I'm talking to them about attendance, like you said, student performance, right? We can get called up for a lot of different things that we are responsible for. But what we have said for the last couple of years is we've been clear about goals. And one of the goals is around wholeness. And when you go to any of our conversations, one of the sub-goals is around athletics and extracurriculars. So what I want to make sure people know is this has already been a little bit in the water, a little bit how Mr. Montgomery talked about. Yes, there were 58 schools that participated in some way or another in middle school, so now we'll be able to ramp up with them. I think we have laid some groundwork. But I also know, to your point, the principal supervisor, are going to have some discussions, right? We're going to have some discussions and say, hey, these opportunities are available to you, and I don't see you jumping in. Maybe they will need support because they're just not sure how, and maybe they'll need support just to make sure that, they just got encumbered by a lot of other things. I anticipate having different conversations with different folks about that so that we can support, but to some degree keep them accountable too, because in the end, it is an equity thing. It goes back to your experience. It goes back to my experience as a teacher and, what has been mentioned here. So I just want to agree with that, and I know part of the journey is a lot of discussions and a lot of support.
I've started your concern because we heard it a few times, and I think it is a very valid one to call out. I do want to note, when we got in front of principals the last time, Chief Davis charged every department in wholeness about what does it look like to get off to a good start. And one of the things we put forward for principals is give us your contact. We know our email is probably going to get lost to you. Identify the person we should be reaching out to because we don't want to use them. They are our inroads into the building, but that's not the person I want to make it clear that we're communicating regularly with because they can't can't lift the work. And so we have asked them to identify who will lead this work for your building. And I'll also credit Dr. Santelises. When we're having an interest survey, yes, we will go with the schools that have indicated they have an interest, but she's also charging us to circle the block and come back around and say, okay, these schools didn't participate, but why? So that'll help us also identify if the barrier is administrative. So I hope that's helpful.
No, that's very helpful, and I appreciate that. And I'm going to move on after this, Mr. Chair, but I think that there's one big point that I didn't originally say, and why this is so important to this council. We're here talking about middle school sports, and this is so important to the council. We're really excited to consistently work with the administration and Baltimore City Public School System. Excited about the $2 million, knowing that that is an incremental step to us moving down this path of providing this opportunity for our young folks. But what we all know, right? This is something that's not anecdotal, but when our school environment provides a whole environment for our young folks, whole environment including extracurricular activities such as sports, we know that that is an angle for us to decrease absenteeism. Engaging our young folks in a way of creating school spirit, engaging our young folks in a way of something to look forward to when they go to school, knowing that we've struggled like every other jurisdiction, urban jurisdiction around the country with absenteeism coming out of COVID. This is just another angle of us bringing more young folks back into middle. What we also know is, how our young folks get lost in middle school. It's literally in 7th, 8th grade year where you choose to go left or you choose to go right, particularly in places like Baltimore City. So that's why, this has been a core competency of us as it relates to providing amazing opportunities for our young folks. I want to say, it's closing out with no additional questions, I'd like to thank you guys for all of the hard work that you've put in. Obviously, this is something that I've consistently talked to the CEO as well as her chief of staff about over the past couple of years. They kept telling me to wait. We will have a program in place, and I think that this is a first and really good swing at attempting to do it. We know that there will be hiccups. This council is not here to kind of criticize or kind of point out what does not happen the right way when we were originally rolling this out. However, we just want to be partners in this. So again, thank you for all your hard work, your time, and your attention on this subject. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Before you put Vice President, I just have a question. Have we, even with the youth sports, we talk about the young people, how are we recruiting the parents to really be a part of this? Because that's really going to make the program work if we really be intentional in making sure the parents participate in the youth sports and not just another program and they can drop the kids off and come back and pick them up. Is any emphasis on the parents?
That will definitely be a focus when we go back on our communication plan, as the council president has identified some additional ways that we can communicate. We have gotten positive feedback from the schools who have shared the information when we've had clinics in the past through the website, but I think our outreach can be greater, so we'll look at ways to better connect them to what we're doing, and so they're not just reliant on the school system to share their information.
And my next question is, a lot of these families it's poverty. So when we have these youth sports, some of them probably coming there hungry. So are we looking at that also when we talk about the youth sports in terms of those families? Because some of them probably don't get a chance to eat. When they come and you want to play sports, you're really not going to participate if your stomach is empty. So are we looking at how we kind of connect that piece, connect that part of them coming to the rec center, to the youth sports, and are we addressing that part? We want them to play, but are they really hungry too?
I don't think the work that we've done has currently addressed it, but we can note it. I know we did have during our clinics, a family show up and she indicated that she was currently homeless at the time. She was happy to be able to have some opportunities. So we thought through barriers in terms of cost of our actual programming. I think now we can dig deeper and think about what other wraparound services can be included in what we provided. But that was not part of our initial work, so thank you.
Yeah, but I think aligning food and nutrition and things that we could offer after school is a more than reasonable question. It is something that we should figure out. All of us either can think back or have children in that age group and we know they're hungry after school, let alone having to do sports. So I think that's a link we can explore.
Thank you, Council Vice President.
And on that note, just another added link as I've been sitting here listening. We have some wonderful higher ed institutions in our city: Hopkins, Morgan, Coppin, BCCC. This is an opportunity for us to do some intergenerational mentoring, and those college institutions can, they might already have some kind of curriculum with some of their programs or training. I know some of these colleges have degrees for people majoring in physical education and so on, and they can weave some of this connection in that requirement for that person, becoming a physical education teacher and so on. There's different ways of reaching our middle schoolers, and just sitting here, that would be a great inroad and very cost-effective as well.
Yeah, like hours of internship to participate with middle school sports or something like that. Yeah, that's another thing. I don't know if we've thought about anything like that or not.
Thank you for that, because that would actually be an extension, and I'll take this opportunity to shout out and give credit to some of our local colleges, because Coppin State University has partnered with us and actually doing a number of the clinics. So we have reached out to the colleges and universities, particularly their teams, and they generally do it as a give back. But it also helps to build that connection, because our students see, hey, wait a minute, these aren't just high school students, these are college students. And then sometimes, we're able to utilize the college campus, or they come to us, and they come out with all of their college gear, and then they're, able to talk to the kids. So we've built in some of the instructional time and that mentorship on that end. So that is a great extension to some of the outreach and partnerships that we've already done with our local higher education institutes.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Torrance, you have additional questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair. My next question is related to two parts, is charter schools. I have two concerns. Charter schools get more per pupil funding than a standard school, so I want to make sure, how are we structuring fee structures for participation? Because that is inequitable in terms of how much they get per student versus maybe a Utah Marshburn that was open, was now closed, right? I just want to know, how are we making sure they're paying their fair share? Yes.
Yes, the instructions we have received are, the charter schools have received their funding, so they will have to pay at cost for all participation. They are included, but they will be charged the cost, not the overall fee, but their.
That's music to my ears. The next question is compliance with athletic regulations. How are we ensuring that charter operators as well as our principals at those schools are being compliant?
As our team has grown, now the programming has grown, the expectations and the requirements are laid out for all of the schools. So whether they are charter, traditional public, all 80 of the schools that we service that participate in the programming have to follow the same guidelines. And those guidelines are explicit and expressed and must be followed, when it comes to coaches, certification, student participation, documentation, and everything like that.
I'm good, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. There are no more questions. We're going to do public testimony. No one is signed up to testify. Is there anyone here who would like to testify that did not sign up in advance? Ms. Marguerite, do we have any call-ins? So we have no call-ins. Thank you. And we are now recessing this particular bill. And we're going to go to the next bill, which is Resolution 23-175R, informational hearing, parity in women's sports. And this bill also, a resolution was introduced by Council President. And Council President, you have any opening remarks?
Thank you. I guess we're like 50 years after Title IX. We understand and know the importance of equity in sports. As aforementioned before about what sports does to someone's confidence, team building, leadership, but also engagement into the school culture and school environment. So we just want to make sure that we're doing all for our young folks, girls and boys, to provide this amazing opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, agency reports, the law department is favorable, but can you explain, I don't know if the amendment's on everybody's desk, could you explain the amendment that you requested?
Yes, so thank you, Mr. Chairman. The amendment requested relates to line 11 of the resolution, and it looks like it may just be a typo, but the word in brackets, populations, should be deleted. That was the only amendment.
Thank you. So, Mr. President, and we're going to start off with you with questions on,
Allow them to have a presentation.
oh yeah, I'm sorry, you do got to do a presentation.
Thank you again for the opportunity to talk about our parity in women's sports and athletics. I want to frame this to how we're going to talk about it. We haven't talked publicly about this before, so I'm going to do a little bit of background on how nationally it's looked upon, parity, because you can look at it in a few different ways. We're then going to look at some sports offerings data that we have with respect to what young women can avail themselves of. We're going to look at some participation data, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about really what we're doing on a day-to-day basis through this presentation. So let's go. Yep, we know the purpose, so let's go ahead and go. Usually, when you think about parity, and this comes from the Office of Civil Rights, it is usually a three-pronged test where you have to show substantial proportionality, you have to show a history and continuing practice of program expansion or accommodating student interest. Let's go. Substantial proportionality. What that means is you can't look at 50-50. You have to look at a school and their percentage of students that are male and the percentage of students that are female, and then compare the participation based on that. And generally, they want it on a school-by-school level with the goal of trying to be within 5%. That's one prong. Another prong is just the history of making improvements and adding opportunities over time. And usually, they look in a 3 to 5 year time frame. And then the third prong is about student interest and really making sure that we ask students what they are interested in and then kind of assess our opportunities based on that. Now I'm going to transition a little bit to our team offerings. And if you look at this, from a team offering standpoint, we actually have more offerings that are female offerings. Some are both male and female, and that is the blue circle. Some, if you go to the yellow circle, are co-ed offerings, which obviously are both. Then you have some that are specific to male or specific to female. And when you really count up the different offerings, there's really one more female offering than there is male. So from that standpoint, we've always pushed to ensure that we have that availability for women in our high schools. Again, if you look at it from the last slide, which was a circle graph or a pie graph, and you just look at the list of the offerings and the ones that are male, female, co-ed, or both, you can see what that is. And then the participation data, and this is what we're going to talk about a little bit. While our offerings even have one more female than male, the total participation data is not equal. And you can see the girls versus boys. To some degree, right, football is such a large sport that it tilts the numbers disproportionately, and we should just be honest about that. But at the same point, right, that should just push us to figure out what to do more. So, when you really start to parse these out, you can see some of the differences between the different sports. And like I said, football kind of sticks out and pushes the data towards more male athletes. One of the things to also point out is a gender equity self-audit report. We're required, we require high schools to perform this type of an internal assessment to make sure that we are following along with Title IX standards. And again, this aligns with the Office of Civil Rights data that we also have to provide. I mean, I think in the future, one of the things that we want to point out for everyone is to make sure, and this is what I'm going to talk a little bit about, is that we are working with schools on individual basis to make sure that whatever barriers they have for young ladies to participate, we are knocking those down. And at the same time, pushing up the middle school conversation we just had so that there is a true pipeline, so that young ladies that start in the 6th grade now feel incredibly confident when they have to then get into the 9th grade and go to high school and compete even at a higher level. So, I mean, I'm going to end up giving a few different anecdotes around, about situations where potentially a young lady may not have something available to them, and we are figuring out some way to do this. So, for instance, at Patterson, Patterson wasn't able to identify enough girls to field a girls lacrosse team, although it is a district-sponsored offering. And so a female student ended up being the goalie in the spring, right, on the boys' team. And so what I'm trying to point out to this is the athletic team works with schools on a literally sport-by-sport basis to try to field the teams, and then when it doesn't, we figure out some type of alternative way of doing that. You know, another example is Douglas, right, has traditionally not had a lot of interest in soccer, but this year they offered a co-ed team as well. Nath and Ben Franklin did a similar thing. Again, just to ensure that the young ladies that have an interest have the availability to participate and practice every single day. Let's keep going. The athletic interest surveys that I talked about before, the last time we did this was right before COVID, I believe. And when we worked with the Office of Civil Rights, they thought that we were meeting the needs based on the interests that were provided. We want to bring that back in the upcoming year. When we get to the last slide around next steps, you're going to hear me say that. Because we need to check this from time to time and make sure that what we believe we're offering is aligned with what we're hearing from our young people. Additionally, I think the previous slide, if we could go back one, MSD is really thinking about expanding and making cheerleading as a state-sponsored event. Usually that is not considered a sport in the past, but that is something that is under consideration as well that we should point out. And that would just be additional opportunities that we could ensure. I mean, a lot of times schools have cheerleading squads, but we could also add that to the list of offerings. Flag football is an interesting one. It was offered as a co-ed program for a middle school program. And again, we'd like to eventually push this up to make sure that high schools can do this as well. Again, this goes back to the pipeline in the previous conversation. Different jurisdictions, I'll name DC because I was there when this happened, expanded to the point where high school flag football teams were very competitive for girls, and we want to ensure we're moving in that direction as well. We've talked about the pipeline, so I don't want to belabor this point, but we do think to get to greater parity, the pipeline is the way to go, and ensuring that our middle school sports, right, when we look at those intent forms, we're going to make sure that we have the offerings for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders that align to our beliefs around parity and opportunities for young ladies. And we have to start it in the 6th grade. Again, these are the next steps that we have. The middle school expansion, reinitiating the interest survey. Again, continuing to work on a school-by-school basis when there seems to be a barrier. If it's a coach that's a barrier, if a team can't be completely fielded, is there some way to make sure they are on a parallel team? And then making sure this, and I think this is the last one where I feel like as the chief of schools, back to the principal discussion in middle school, that I have some work to do, which is ensuring that schools know their information around proportionality. It is another data point, right? And if I had principals around me, there's a lot of information flying at them. But I think they have to know and be more aware, and I have to take that responsibility with my team to make sure they know, yes, I mean, at Digital Harbor, for instance, if you look at the participation numbers, it seems out of whack, but there are more boys in Digital Harbor. And when you end up comparing the proportionality, they're pretty close, while some schools are a little farther away. So I think we have to mine that data and get that data available and put it a little bit more front and center for school leaders, and then work with them on that support. They know generally that it's important, but until you put it in front of them like this, then it gains more traction, and I think we have a little bit of work to do that, and to make that more available. Overall, those are the next steps, and with that, we'll take additional questions.
Thank you, Chief Davis. Before we even start, I know you mentioned Title IX. I just want to explain what that is, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex in education programs and activities in all public and private elementary, secondary schools, school districts, colleges, and universities receiving any federal funds. So we wanted to make, because we did mention Title IX, but it's a public is watching, so we want to make sure we explain what that means. Now we can go to Council President for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chief. What's the definition of participation?
You're on the team, I believe, but I'll let the team get a little more detailed.
Yes, that's pretty much the answer. Students are recorded as participating if they are rostered to play the sport for their school.
Got you. So I've tried out for the team. I've made the team. That means I'm in that ledger of participating on that team sport.
That is correct.
Correct. Particularly when we're talking about girls' sports, it's been my experience in Baltimore City Public Schools that schools field teams, and then those teams quickly drop out because there is no participation. Are they counted in these numbers?
No, if the team is dropped and they don't fill the team, they should not show up in our numbers. But what you stated is something that occurs. We've tried to take a slightly different approach, because what is not often, I guess, commonly understood, while we recognize and we want all schools to try, sometimes the schools are injured that actually field a team. They're losing contests because they were scheduled to play people who don't field teams. And so what we've done a little bit differently is those that have finished the season during the scheduling year are entered into the master schedule, and teams that have kind of been on the bubble, they're allowed to still field their team, but kind of independently schedule so it doesn't affect and take games from people who have traditionally upheld their programming.
Is that a new change to
Yes.
policy?
Mm-hmm.
Is this the first year that we're going to have that policy?
Yes.
Okay, all right. You came prepared, huh?
I
Well,
tried.
this has been an issue of mine for a
No,
couple
it
of years.
has, and we've done it in the past. COVID, we tried to show grace, but maybe we did so too long,
Okay.
because we don't want to eliminate students from participating,
Yeah.
but we recognize that it's another side of the coin. And so, yes,
Yes.
we took a hard line. We hope we repair from COVID.
I appreciate that.
And if we didn't, we hope people continue to do it, but they'll have to do it independently scheduled.
No, I appreciate that, because, and the reason is it puts a competitive disadvantage to the teams that have all these teams on their schedule. They don't play, they get all these wins, they go into the state tournament, and, they've literally played maybe 4 or 5 games during the season, right? And that happens consistently in girls soccer, girls softball, volleyball, and, I just freeing up the schools that have, robust programs and allowing them to not necessarily schedule the schools that we're still working to work on this pipeline and all the kind of things that we mentioned earlier, to build up their programs, to provide real competition and real access to the sport. When we talk about proportionality, I think that was prong number one. Where's the data on proportionality?
And we didn't bring that level of detail, but we can provide it
If
to
we could just
council.
set up another meeting offline,
Yes.
to go over that.
And again, for the public and for people, just to make sure they understand, it is never a 50-50 thing. It depends on the population of a school. So if a school is 70% boys, then the proportionality needs to be within 5%.
Yeah.
And if it's 70% girls, then that needs to be within 5% too. So it's a school-by-school basis that we look at. But we can get that data. It's really difficult to show because you have to look at total enrollment and then school participation and show the 5% or not. So, but we can do that.
The other thing I thought about when you look at like the data behind proportionality is, for instance, I don't think that we have one public school that offers JV soccer for girls, right? I think that's right.
You're correct.
All right, or like JV soccer for softball.
So softball is a little bit different. We have scheduled in the past a full schedule, and then there's no teams. And so that's the difficult piece here, I believe, as we're looking through the data. Our opportunities are available. We have a participation issue. And so
Correct.
while we feel we offer it, we do not get enough interested participants for softball. Most people are pushing everybody to varsity just to have a team.
Or, I mean, but it also puts, again, we're talking about competitive disadvantage to the young girl who says like in ninth grade, you know, she has to compete at a varsity level. She might not be prepared to compete at a varsity level. She sits on the bench for a year, 2 years, not getting the level of playing time that she needs to build herself up to compete and can play, like we have, say, for JV baseball or JV basketball or JV sports that we have for our young folks. I think this all gets back to, at the end of the day, City Schools is not attempting to not provide opportunities for young girls to participate. However, again, without the pipeline, that's why I did these two bills together. Without the pipeline for middle school, it provides a huge challenge because, you know, it's going to be organized sports through school that many of our girls get access to these sports. The concern I have with that theory and why we have to fix that theory is, you know, if we have a young kid that, you know, isn't properly prepared to take on algebra, right? And then we have another kid that had pre-algebra in middle school and get to ninth grade, and we give them both an algebra textbook, the same exact textbook. We give them the same exact structure. We give them the same exact opportunity to learn algebra. One is going to probably excel or do well or sustain learning algebra than the other, right? That's not really equity. That is looking at it from an equality lens. And I think that when we talk about male sports and female sports in our city, when we look at proportionality, it's really done through a lens of equality and not equity. And I know this is all brand new, like for the city of Baltimore. So I don't expect us to have like a robust and detailed plan today. However, you know, this is something that I've been passionate about for the past couple of years. Again, very excited to where we are, but I think we also have to continue to work together to know where we have to continue to build on. And I want you guys to know that, again, this council stands very firm on this, not because I'm an avid sports lover, but also we know the connection between sports and our young folks excelling just in life. And young women should have the same level of access and opportunity to do that, compete, get the leadership skills, get the team camaraderie skills as much as possible. So that from a proportionality perspective.
I think the work is ongoing, but most of those babies can't sit because it's not enough kids. They have to get out there. So that is something that we're definitely looking at. The schools have identified it. When we're doing the surveys, I think one of our greatest challenges, I mean, we want to answer the question, why? Why are they not playing? In the surveys, they've shared with us, some flat out, and they're pretty honest in these surveys, they don't like sports. We understand that it's not everybody's cup of tea. Some are saying, I have commitments to family after school. Others are saying I participate in things that are conflicting with, you know, these practices because they're after school every day. So we are definitely trying to be more creative. And one of the things, I, of course, was an athlete after school. So I probably didn't think of it this way, but I've looked at some research. Aspen Institute does a great job. And what we're asking schools to consider is, are we not fully utilizing an intramural perspective? I think we've made some assumptions that just because people don't try out for teams, they don't like sport. And what I'm learning is some people are saying, I do like it. I don't want to do it every day. I don't want it at that level of competition. Maybe I don't want to, you know, come here on Saturday for it. But if you offered something less formal, I would participate. And so I think the way we define sport, we also have to kind of, you know, look at that too, because maybe there are other ways that we can engage students that are a little less traditional.
Music to my ears. Thank you so much. Now I'm going to go to prong 3, and it kind of goes back to the proportionality, and we kind of already talked about it, but where it shows more female offerings. I think that slide, not intentional, is a little misleading because of the whole JV versus varsity thing. We're looking at it as a sport, right? But when you have a JV and a varsity soccer offering for boys and only a varsity offering for girls, from a proportionality perspective, that is not equal math, right? So I think that we have to also take a step back and look at, it's less about looking at it from a sport perspective and more looking at the number of spots, right? So say if we're carrying, on average, we carry 45 players on a football team, or on average we carry 18 players on a soccer team, and we have 2 teams, that's 36. But you have to carry 24 players on one girls team because you only have one varsity. So that's less spots for a girl to be able to compete and play with our school. So I think that, again, as we just continue to evolve this discussion, I think it's important for us to kind of change our lens as we look at equity versus equality, and we look at the proportionality requirement associated with Title IX.
And I think in the 90s, they took that stance. From my understanding, I was not here yet in Baltimore, but that was the reason they discontinued offering JV baseball, and they added dance to kind of make greater equity there. And so the district does not cover JV baseball. We do cover JV softball, but we don't have teams in those areas.
Correct.
And so that is the challenge. I think those opportunities are there, surprisingly. I know basketball is considered to, be ingrained in Baltimore culture, but we probably have, as you noted, the highest participation in volleyball for girls, actually. That is the sport that they choose the most often. That is where we have the most JVs, because even in JV girls basketball, there is a struggle to fill those teams. So while the offerings are there to see that parity, hopefully the pipeline is the answer, but we do just need greater overall participation.
Gotcha. And then my last set of questions, Mr. Chair, is, again, this parity discussion, not necessarily specific to Title IX, but parity just inside of our coordinated sports in the high school level, and some of the disparity between teams, like scores of 120 to 5, and putting teams together that, from a competitive perspective, doesn't do anything for the team that is losing that bad morale. It's been my experience growing up in Baltimore City, playing Baltimore City Public School sports in high school, that when you go and blow out a team like that, it becomes very dangerous at the end of the game as it relates to injuries, as it relates to fights. I can account for a couple examples of that. So when we talk about scheduling inside of girls' sports, are we looking at that to ensure that, one, we're putting teams together that have some level of parity, and two, the other side of it is not just the side of the losing team for the winning team, that they're able to interact with competition that's of their level so they can be prepared when they go out into the states to go against other teams around the state?
From the standpoint of a former athlete, a coach, I hear you, but I think that I'm encouraged to continue the conversation, but it's difficult. I don't want to isolate or call out anyone here, but that's not just an issue in girls' sport. I have a football team that people probably don't, nobody wants to play them in the district, but it is a Baltimore City league. In order for us to have a champion, in order for us to fund all of the teams, they have to play somebody within the district. They can't have a totally independent schedule. And I lean heavily on the coaches. While I do understand that talent can be lopsided, I think coaches, when we're talking about wholeness, when we're talking about they're all our students, I think there's also a way to manage and keep scores down if we want to do that. But yes, there are some lopsided games and competitions, but if there is a league structure, there has to be some ability to play each other, and I think we have to work harder at making sure we do that respectfully with each other, because as you noted, yes, it can change for the kids. Nobody wants to be demoralized, but I feel like that's all of our responsibility to kind of make sure that that doesn't happen. I can't ensure that all teams will be there will be parity in the competition. There are a lot of factors we don't control, and then there are just some outliers. Some people have kids who have much more experience, they're stronger, they're bigger. That is the nature of what we're doing. So I think how we do that safely. And I would like to note, we have a restriction on the number of contests that every school can play. Football is a little bit different because they're only playing once a week, but in our other sports, particularly basketball, there are opportunities for non-league competition, so you can go compete with people that you feel like are on their level. We try to find ways to give certain sports or certain schools as much of that as possible, but there does have to be some league competition if we will maintain, that structure.
So, again, I'm not sure why you say you don't want to call out someone specifically. I wasn't talking about a specific case.
No, I'm in sports.
Say again?
I didn't want to call out the team that I know probably nobody wants us to schedule them against or play. That's what I meant.
Yeah. But even with that example, I think that kind of going back to the boys versus girl parity example, obviously in recent history, Dunbar, Maryville have been top echelon sports programs from a football perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Probably could name a couple other schools that fall, below that, but, can compete. They're not going to lose 60-0. I mean, and this has been a problem historically in Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a school, we're pretty good in football, week by week, 60-0, 56-6. That was just the run of the mill on certain schools. I think that there's like a medium that I would like to get to as it relates to that scheduling. And I guess what I'm talking about is the amount of required, I guess, inside of league games. And it's a very complicated issue. I think I think the need to try to find greater emphasis on feeder programs and providing opportunity and resources for our women is exponentially higher and more difficult than what we see in some of the male parity. And there's huge male parity too, particularly in basketball. I mean, we see these same scores, 80 to 15 or 20 or whatever. So want to continue to work with you on that. Just want to really highlight that. But I think that when we talk about female sports and the parity inside of sports and the scheduling is a major concern to this council. I want to continue to work with you on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Real quick, before I go to Councilwoman Porter, I just have a question. You remember when we had the MSAs, like Dunbar, Lake Clifton, and then they combined it on the state level? And this has been a concern from a lot of the high school basketball coaches, and I'm gonna use Dunbar because I went there. So when there is a recruiter that wanna see the young men that play in high school at Dunbar, for some reason, the coach can only have 3 players in the gym. But in the county, you have a whole team, the whole high school basketball team. So what happens is those kids miss out on opportunity to go into college. Why is that happening now? And I get this from all the coaches right now. So our kids are missing out. And if you see a lot of the talent here in Baltimore, they're not going to these city schools anymore. They're going outside of Baltimore City because of the restriction that's in place right now for schools like Dunbar and Douglas and City. So if a recruiter come and want to see that particular kid, if they have more than 4 kids from the basketball team in that gym, they are in violation. How do we change that? Because I've been talking about this for like 5 years. And it's very unfortunate that our kids don't get an opportunity to be recruited by whatever the national colleges in any sports. But right now, that's what's happening here in Baltimore right now for our high school basketball teams.
If permitted, I would like to receive more information to follow up because we are following Maryland Public Secondary Schools Athletic Association rules, so we should all be doing the same thing from the city to the county. So if I can just get more clarity on the ask, we do have out-of-season practice limitations about the number of people that can participate. We've done some expansion to make sure that there are some more out-of-season opportunities than there were previously, but I just want to make sure I clearly understand the question because from Baltimore City to Baltimore County to PG, we should not have different rules as it relates to out of season.
Well, I know some
I didn't say
high school. No. I'm just saying I know some high school basketball players that actually told them they was in violation if they have that whole high school team in that gym while a recruiter come there, maybe look at 2 kids. So again, I go back because now our kids missing on an opportunity. And if you look at the recruitment now in Baltimore City, Dunbar and Lake Clifton used to get the best talent in the city. They don't get it no more. You know why? Because they go into the county where they can be recruited heavily because of the restrictions they don't have. in the county, and I've been concerned about that because the coach has been talking about it. But I'll talk to you off record about that, but that's something we need to look at and address. Mr. President?
And Director, I believe the chair is talking about the new NCAA regulation, maybe 3-4 years ago, that provided the 2 open weeks for high school sports. Then the state regulation that high school sports basketball teams can't play together outside of the season, but I guess other, private schools obviously can. So I think that that's probably where the question is generating from.
And that has, I guess, been fixed with an update to COMAR with the NCAA evaluation periods.
Correct.
And so that part I know has been taken care of. And if it's private schools, then it makes it's a little bit more clear to me. But there are, I believe, ways around it. And so I will talk to him more in depth because I think a lot of times if it was an open gym environment, just inviting the team was a different scenario. But I would just follow up with more clarity to
Yeah,
make
if you
sure.
could include me in that discussion,
Absolutely.
please.
Thank you. Council Vice President?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm sure my colleague, Councilwoman Porter, will appreciate this statement because we just kind of had a quick conversation about the Women's Commission, the Mayor's Women's Commission, which really just kind of started. They have their, I think it's 19 to 21 members. They're formulating their goals and ideas, and I just think that this is an opportune time to reach out to, I think the chair, Ms. Muth is the chair's name, and also it's, that commission is in the Office of Equity under Dana Moore, so they're at their stages of formulating how they can advise and help and do things, and definitely a free service of women that want to help, with parity and everything within the city. And this is a good opportunity to give them, to add that to their list of things to help, whether it's through communications or just any ways to really help move this piece forward.
Thank you so much for sharing that reference.
Of course. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Porter, we have 2 questions I just want to answer real quick. And I guess whoever want to answer from the chat, can you explain the decision not to offer JV girls soccer? I know at Poly, 50 girls signed up and had submitted their paperwork before August the 1st. And it says, did anyone answer the question and why the district doesn't support JV girls soccer?
With your permission, I know you framed it at the beginning about individual things, so I have permission to answer. Okay.
Yes, you did.
Thank you so much. I want to make sure I follow the rules. At my last check, I did a check-in yesterday. I believe there were 33 students that were registered, actually, that attended tryouts yesterday for Poly. I think when you look at our numbers, it's not really that the district doesn't offer JV. We had roughly 3 to 4 varsity teams, so there were not numbers supporting the need for JV. I did not receive or hear of any interest until roughly June. Our schedules were already done and approved in March, but at the prompting of Chief Davis, we reached out and told the school that they could move forward, and if they would, support that, we would support them in the effort. We don't do it from a district standpoint. We don't have a schedule to provide, like a master schedule or anything, because we would not have any teams for them to play. It is also my understanding that they had a little bit of difficulty with the few teams that we have filling out the rest of their schedule because they had to go to non-conference opponents to do that. But I think they were able to at least get to the maximum number of games or within one. And one of the things I know I found, even as a longtime athletic director at Poly, oftentimes schools, because they want to maximize their transportation, they didn't really want to play you varsity only. Like they were often look for schools that would be able to give them 2 games for their program because it was best to use their resources. So it's not like a district said no. When I spoke to Director Sawyer, he said that they would do their best to work it out. I don't know where they landed, but there's not a prohibition or reason that they can't offer it from the school level. We don't sponsor it because we barely have varsity teams at this time.
Thank you for the explanation.
Mr. Chair, I was just saying, full disclosure, I have a conflict of interest in that last question. I would also like to say is I did not plan it, so I want you guys to know that my daughter plays soccer at Poly.
And I didn't ask nobody to do that either.
I'm good. As long as you gave me permission to answer, I'm good.
Councilwoman Porter.
Thank you. I did have a quick question about field hockey. So I sit on, I'm attempting to sit on the board at Towson University, and one of the kind of data points that they shared with me was that they had 15 full scholarships for field hockey for a women's league, and 12 of them went unspent. And so do you all have any kind of approach to kind of increase minority participation or just overall women's participation in field hockey? From the numbers, it looks like only 12 girls throughout the city actually participate, but I know that, you know, private schools like Institut Notre Dame, NDP, Mercy, they have a very robust field hockey operation.
Thank you so much for the question. I think it kind of goes back to, I guess, why the council president said he linked, I guess, these two together for this hearing. Only one school. You see the numbers there because it's representing one school that has offered field hockey as a club. Two schools tried it previously, but they have since let it go. We don't have a direct strategy for field hockey specifically, but the work we're doing is really trying to get to the why, although there are a number of answers to just increase girls' participation overall. I've heard very similar things, and we've brought in people who are extremely excited about the post-high school opportunities in girls lacrosse. I'm open. I'm taking down the notes and the references. I don't know the answer to this question. I know the athletic directors see it. I know that we greatly want to improve it. We have our own personal testimonies. We have almost probably 50% of female athletic directors. We want to solve it. It's a big issue, and we just don't know exactly where to start. But if you sharing that resource is positive, but we do think the middle school and youth programming is really the crux of how we're going to move this forward. If we get students who are coming to high school looking for these opportunities, if we have student body presidents demanding these opportunities, then we know we have to provide them. But we have spaces, we have plenty of opportunity. We need interested and able bodies. They don't even, have to be athletically inclined. We'll do that part. We'll teach you that part. We just need to get them interested and get them there.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I mean, like you said, it starts at the middle school level. Like I'm seeing soccer and lacrosse in some of these private schools. They're starting those private clubs. They're starting clubs at the middle school level, and they are fully going in to high school, really targeting those scholarship opportunities. And these are not just $1,000 to $2,000 scholarships. These are full scholarships that can be availed to our students at Baltimore City Public Schools. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I came here a little earlier, and we had a lot of youth works there in the back. And you know that, Councilwoman Porter, you talking about lacrosse for women? Do you know that young lady, that's the first thing she said to me? She said, what about lacrosse? Exactly. So we was trying to get, I guess she left, and it's obvious that you brought that up, Councilwoman. Marguerite, they left? Did they leave? Yeah, because I want her to, she just bluntly said something about lacrosse. So when that came up, I was hoping she was back there and come back and want to say something. So we have one more question online. And it says, without district sponsorships, how would you suggest transportation and the coach and other expenses be covered?
I mean, generally, we cover it, but there might
I just
be
want to
more
clarify, is this
detail.
question back to the soccer issue? Is that the related?
No, it's just talking about transportation. Jay.
But that was my question, because the things that we've scheduled, we do currently provide the funds for that, although I will say in full disclosure, based on now the funding structure being different, we're told that a lot of those costs will be pushed to schools in places where we are not covering things, because I guess full disclosure, served as the athletic director at Poly for 8 years. And so I know that the district did not cover JV baseball, and we funded it through a separate account because it was not covered where there was interest. So I would anticipate in the same manner that was done, and that's the conversation that I had with Director Sawyer that they were exploring, so.
Thank you. Councilman Torrance?
Hi, all. My first question is, I noticed we have dance as a co-ed, but we don't have cheerleading, and I'm seeing that at a national level that we're seeing cheerleading being both an opportunity for co-ed male and females. I think that's probably an offering that we might want to explore at our high schools, especially because of the low equipment costs. I'm just being transparent. In addition to that, I'm just gonna say golf as well is another co-ed sport that we have not really explored at city schools. I know at one time we did, and the upfront costs in 2013 was roughly around $12,000 to provide it for multiple schools. I wonder if we are able to do that again, to look at what offerings that we don't have at co-ed that we can offer, because I know that helps us with balancing out our large JV and varsity football teams at some of our schools, and provides that offering so that we are compliant with the state and federal regulations in terms of parity.
I don't know if you were in my email this morning, but my email about golf did go out this morning. So traditionally, we have not had schools that have offered golf, but I would like to acknowledge what we do when we know that there are students that have golf experience. We make sure that we register them as a individual participating as a team, and we align them in the Baltimore County tournament to use that as their qualifier to be able to participate in the state golf tournament. So where there is golf interest, similar to how we, make sure girls are participating on boys teams, we do try to make sure we give them the opportunity to compete for a state championship in that sense. And also, as it relates to cheerleading, I am on the task force as the state is moving it, but I do know that it will have to be some structural changes, because in order to be defined as a sport, it needs to operate with a number of competitions, and so sideline cheer doesn't necessarily qualify for that, and so restructuring, and I will, work through that as we propose to enter into the state as they accept it. We just have to revamp kind of what we're doing to make sure it's defined as a sport, and it may change the style of what we're currently referring to as cheerleading.
Perfect. And then the other question I have is related to bowling. It was another thing that I had started but did not get a chance to finish while I was at city schools. Have we looked into bowling as a co-ed sport as well? I do know that MSA explored the options of adding it because it was an easier competition, and also the fact that there were scholarship opportunities at the collegiate level.
Chief Davis has definitely raised that inquiry about bowling. I know some lanes are staying open, but that's definitely something we can explore. It's on his list, most definitely.
All right, my last question.
Can you talk into the mic,
I will.
Council?
Here's
Thank
my
you.
last question, and this is one that we more likely another meeting about this conversation. I'm looking at the number of the student population, the number of efficiencies that we have at our schools because we closed schools. This is a conversation goes back to sustainability. I know when I was with you all, my issue was that we had smaller schools and we had to combine them to suit up a football team. My question is, how are we going to have this conversation with the schools if we're offering more offerings and the sustainability of it? Are we thinking about merging schools in the same campus? Because that is one of the biggest issues, because I know my alma mater was, when I went there, Carver was 1,300 students. They're down to 900 now. So suiting up teams is not as, there's not a plentiful of bodies that actually participate in these sports as they usually were before. So how are we going to what strategy do we have to support schools that have smaller student population sizes? And have we thought about the merger of schools as well when we're doing the closures for our 21st century schools, and how we're doing it effectively to ensure that we can offer sports in a considerable way?
Yeah, I'll use some of the schools on the west side that are small that we are trying to put together currently. I believe it's Renaissance and Augusta Fells and Vivian T and BDJ that we are working to do something like that. It is, the coordination in the organization is a lot. I don't want to lie about it. But at the same time, we are always open to that with our small schools because it does make a lot of sense from the vantage point that you're saying.
And I think to speak to that, it really, we have a large variance. If you look at the district, the way the state divides us into classifications based on enrollment, we are primarily a 1A district. Over 50% of our schools fall in the smallest classification of the state. So there are decisions that will have to be made even at the school level. If you have a school enrollment of 600 and you take out those who don't qualify to participate, those who are not interested to qualify to participate, it does change the pool that you're selecting from. And then the competition, you may have somebody with a school that has 1,300. So it is a challenge. And I think sometimes we've asked schools to really evaluate what is it that your students really want to do, but then we have a larger issue. If you are enrolled at a school and you really have this interest, and that is the bigger challenge. you don't have enough people on the team for a sport that you're very interested in.
And then for that question for the smaller schools, which is a follow-up, is about conditioning, because I know at a number of schools, some players had to be like Patrick Ricard and play both ways for football. So how are we supporting those schools when they're doing that, when those young people are exerting their strength and their endurance even more?
Those are not ideal situations, but one of the things we do is try not to move teams forward if they don't meet a minimum squad size, and it's a delicate balance. You don't want to remove an opportunity from a school, but you want to make sure schools can do things safely. So there are definitely times that we do have to make the tough decision and say that this school cannot field a certain program in a certain year because they do not have enough participants to do it safely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council President?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have one last question. From a Comar perspective, I know we spoke to Comar when we talked about the open weeks. What's the week called? What is those 2 weeks called? NCAA weeks?
That NCAA evaluation period.
Evaluation weeks, yeah. That made me come up with, I think, of another question. From a Comar perspective, does it disallow schools to have a athletic director be a coach?
So that is not regulated by Comar. That is actually really done by each local.
Yeah.
And so there are some local, it varies across the state, just to give you, I guess, some background. Some locals have athletic directors who can coach. Some have athletic directors who can coach maybe one sport or coach with principal permission, but that's not covered under Comar. And some have more administrative roles, so they don't coach at all because they are in an administrative union.
Is Baltimore City the only jurisdiction that disallows that?
No.
No. What other ones do?
I will have to get them by name. I do have a chart in the office, so I don't mind following up with you.
If you could follow up with me on that.
Absolutely.
And then the background, what's the background behind why you wouldn't allow an athletic director to also coach?
I think those who serve in an administrative capacity, Baltimore City is unique, and currently our athletic directors primarily are all still classroom teachers. And they are paid through a stipend. Some parts of the state have shifted, and they are paid as like 10-month, 11th month, or 12-month administrators. And so I think those who are operating and serving more as administrators with no instructional classes, I think they have restrictions that they are not serving as coaches.
So the concern is just overtaxing the individual, AD, being a teacher, as well as being a coach? Is that
I
what the
believe,
concern?
but I can, the
right.
people who have shifted, I will ask them like kind of what their rationale is.
If we could put that on our follow-up, I'd
Absolutely.
appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. There is no public testimony. No one signed up to testify. Is anyone here who would like to testify that did not sign up in advance? That ends public testimony. I wanted to mention to, I got to vote on amendment. So this amendment is from the Law Department. I believe it's in front of everyone's desk. Is there a motion to vote on the amendment for Resolution 23-0175R?
Motion to vote on amendment number 1.
Second.
Is there a motion to vote on the amendment?
I make a motion to move the amendment.
Motion made by Council President, Vice President. Is there a second?
Second, Torrance.
Second by Councilman Torrance. Stokes is a yes. Councilman Bullock? Yes. Councilman Cohen? Yes. Councilman Glover is absent. Council Vice President?
Yes.
And Councilman Torrance? Councilwoman Porter stepped out. The vote is taken. The motion passed. And before we recess, I want to thank the school system for coming before the council and explain, and to Council President for these two resolutions. One, the school system didn't just talk about it. They put their money where their mouth is. So that's what we like here in the council, So I want to thank you guys for your presentation. It was great. Thank the committee members for those good questions that we need to talk about when we talk about female youth sports. And if the council president wants some closing remarks, he's welcome to do it. This hearing is in recess. Thank you.